The midnight hour was approaching in the labyrinth of Shinjuku. Down a nondescript stairwell, dampened by the scent of rain and aging wood, a heavy door groaned open to reveal a space that felt disconnected from the world above. Keiko Tanaka was already there, positioned in the center of the training floor as if she were a permanent fixture of the building itself. Standing at 5'6", she possessed a terrifying kind of stillness, not the pause of a person waiting for a cue, but the icy calm of someone who had already visualized the conclusion of the night. Her uniform was frayed at the lapels, a silent testament to a decade of grappling, and her darkened belt hung with the unpretentious weight of a rank bought with blood and scar tissue. She wasn't loosening her muscles or preparing her breath, she was simply pinning the doorway with her gaze. Keiko's record wasn't just a list of wins, it was a ghost story told in the city's fighting dens. In 3 years of illicit matches within these 4 walls, she had never tasted defeat. She had dismantled giants, seasoned wrestlers, and aggressive street brawlers who mistook their size for an advantage. They all exited the same way, broken, limping, or draped in a suffocating shroud of humiliation. To the underground circles of Tokyo, her name carried more weight than any Olympic gold. Hiroshi Mori, a veteran promoter with skin like cured leather, watched from the shadows. He had presided over hundreds of bouts, but this felt different. For the first time, a challenger hadn't been recruited or stumbled into the ring. This young man had sought her out specifically, asking for the invincible Keiko by name. 3 weeks prior, a 21-year-old Bruce Lee had touched down in Japan. While his name was beginning to hum like a live wire across the American West Coast, he was an unknown quantity in the rigid hierarchy of Tokyo. In Seattle, students spoke of him as if describing a miracle, a fighter who moved in the spaces between seconds. But Japan had its own gatekeepers, and Bruce had been cautioned about the local landscape. His guide was Chen Wei, a stoic kung fu master who bridged the gap between Hong Kong and Tokyo. Chen was a man of precise words, and his description of Keiko was clinical. He described her not as a martial artist, but as a biological architect who understood how to deconstruct the human frame in seconds. When Bruce asked if she accepted challenges, he didn't do so with a sneer of arrogance, but with the genuine spark of a scientist who had just discovered a fascinating new element. The invitation rippled through the city's hidden channels until it reached Mori. The promoter did his due diligence, expecting to find a boastful amateur. Instead, reports from San Francisco described a blur, a man who was lean where others were bulky and relaxed where others were rigid. One contact simply wrote that they had never witnessed a human being move with such terrifying velocity. When Mori relayed this to Keiko, she didn't flinch. Upon hearing the challenger was only 21, her expression softened into something more predatory and intrigued. "Good," she had remarked, her eyes fixed on the floor. "The ones who think for themselves are always more interesting." Now, at 11:47 p.m., the door swung wide and Bruce Lee entered the arena. He was flanked by Chen Wei and a young Dan Inosanto, whose sharp eyes immediately began scanning Keiko like a computer processing data. The room was sparse, occupied only by the combatants, their seconds, Mori, and a massive judoka named Takeda, a man Keiko had previously defeated, who now watched her with the devotion of a scholar. The dojo was bathed in the unforgiving glare of overhead lights, leaving no room for deception. Keiko offered a deep, sincere bow, acknowledging the sanctity of the space. Keiko returned the gesture, her focus already narrowing. Mori outlined the terms in a low voice. No points, no clocks, no ego. The struggle would continue until one side yielded or could no longer stand. As they took their positions, the air in the basement seemed to thicken, pressurized by the intensity of 2 masters measuring one another. Keiko initiated the dance. She didn't charge, she moved with the cold logic of geometry. Her footsteps traced an invisible spiral, cutting off Bruce's escape routes and shrinking the mat before a single hand was laid. Bruce didn't back away. He pivoted with a ghost-like grace, his weight never fully committed, offering Keiko no leverage to exploit. When the first contact occurred, it was a lightning-fast exchange of forearms. Bruce didn't block her reaching hand, he redirected it with a touch so brief it was almost polite, yet it carried a clear message. I am already ahead of you. The intensity ratcheted up. Keiko began to unleash the raw, adaptive judo she had forged in the streets, explosive hip tosses and leg sweeps that defied traditional mechanics. She was a master of the long game, seeking any grip that would allow her to dictate Bruce's center of gravity. Under this relentless pressure, Bruce was forced to operate at the edge of his reflexes. For 40 agonizing seconds, they were a blur of white and black fabric. Finally, Keiko secured a partial grip on his collar. It was the opening she needed. She lunged into an internal trip, a move that should have sent Bruce crashing to the floor. But instead of resisting, Bruce compressed his entire frame, dropping his weight into the heart of her throw. He became an unmovable anchor, and her momentum dissipated into nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Keiko paused for a bad heart, a rare moment of recalibration for a woman who usually finished fights in the first minute. Takeda whispered from the corner that she was becoming more dangerous. A thinking Keiko was a lethal Keiko. Indeed, the third exchange was a masterpiece of human movement. Keiko abandoned the linear and began attacking in sweeping arcs, trying to map the hidden patterns of Bruce's defense. In response, Bruce broke his own rhythm, intentionally varying his counters so she could never find a home for her techniques. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a high-speed debate spoken in the language of physics and intent. 6 minutes in, both fighters were marked by the exertion. Keiko's uniform was heavy with sweat, and the surgical precision of Bruce's footwork was beginning to show the fraying edges of fatigue. Then, the moment arrived. Keiko locked in a perfect grip. Right lapel, left sleeve. It was the total control every judoka dreams of. She executed a harai goshi, a massive hip throw with every ounce of her remaining strength. Bruce was launched into the air, but as his body accelerated toward the mat, he performed a feat of athletic genius. He didn't fight the fall, he rolled with it, converting the terminal velocity of the throw into a fluid somersault. Before Keiko could even drop to the ground to finish him, Bruce was back on his feet, balanced and ready. They stood paralyzed in a moment of mutual epiphany. Keiko had never seen a human being survive that throw. Bruce had never felt a force so close to absolute. In that shared gaze, the competitive fire was replaced by a profound, silent respect, the kind only found at the very peak of human capability. Mori turned to Chen Wei and whispered a question in Japanese. Chen watched Bruce find his stance once more, his eyes reflecting the gravity of the scene. "What did you tell him?" Inosanto asked. Chen didn't look away from the mat. "I told him," Chen replied softly, "that he finally found a real fight." The atmosphere had shifted. The walls of the dojo seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them under the harsh light. The testing was over. The observation was finished. As Keiko stepped forward for the final time, Bruce met her halfway, no longer just a student of her movement, but an equal partner in a dance that would be whispered about in the backstreets of Shinjuku for decades to come.